So now that we've talked about the square root method and we've talked about perfect square trinomials, I want to talk to you about how we can use those two pieces of information to solve a quadratic equation for its zeros, x-intercepts, roots, or solutions by using something called completing the square. And this is where we take a quadratic equation and we create it to look like a perfect square trinomial so that we can easily put it into um, the square root method, problem solving method, and create an HK equation. So from a standard form. So this is called completing the square. And when we do this, we're taking what we learned from 32.1, which was square root method. And then we're going to take our standard form and we're going to transform it so we can complete it using square roots. And this involves us adding a term to one side and transforming it into that perfect square trinomial. So I know that sounds like a lot of words, so let's look at an example. And this is a very methodical, and I'll give you the individual steps on the side so that you know what we're following. So we're going to look at this first example. X squared plus 10x minus 6 equals 0. And we're going to complete the square. So the first thing that we need to do, isolate the variable terms by adding 6 to both sides. So you can see that they did this. So we're going to call this step 1, which is move C. So we want to move C away from A and B. So when we do this, now we're going to be left with x squared. Now I'm going to teach you to leave a space. X squared plus 10x plus blank equals 6 plus blank. Because whatever we end up putting in this space right here, we're going to have to put on the other side to keep our equations balanced. So how do we figure out what goes in that space? So we need to take our b and divide it by 2. So you can see that's what they've done here. 10 divided by 2 is 5. And then whatever you get, you're going to square it. So they said 5 squared is 25. And that is actually, you can see it down here, what they put in the box. Now, if we add 25 to the left, we have to remember to add it to the right so it stays balanced. So now we have x squared plus 10x plus 25. They went ahead and collected like terms, and they got 31. So you can see here that on the left, this is a perfect square trinomial, which is why we did that lesson. So you can see we're going to take the square root of A and the square root of C, the sine of B. We need to double check, is this 2 times A times C? Yes, it is. So now we can see, in fact, that we have x plus 5 quantity squared equals 31. And we have now completed that whole completing the square part. So now we just need to solve for x. So now this is square root method. So we're going to take the inverse of a square is square root. Remember, a square root is positive and negative. So x plus 5 equals plus or minus the square root of 31. Square root of 31 does not simplify. And then they subtracted 5 from both sides. So we have the solution. X is negative 5 plus the square root of 31, and x is negative 5 minus the square root of 31. So I'm going to do letter A, and then we'll look at going through and letting you try letter B. So again, I'm going to write the steps over here. Step 1 is always going to be move C. Okay, if we go back up, you can see that we did that. And we're going to take B and divide it by 2 and then square it. We're going to collect like terms. We're going to factor our perfect square trinomial. And then, of course, we would solve. So let's go through these steps here. So C here is 3. So I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides. That's my step 1. So now I have x squared minus 8x. Remember, I'm going to leave a space, and on a perfect square trinomial, C is always positive, equals, I'm going to go ahead and put those together, and I get 8 plus something. So now I'm going to look at my B. My B is 8. You could leave it negative if you wanted. Divided by 2 is negative 4, and we're going to square that. So I get 16. 16 is what is going to go into my spaces. So here's 2. Negative 4 times negative 4 is positive 16. So this is where we're going to collect like terms number 3. So I have x squared minus 8x plus 16. 8 and 16 is 24. So now I can factor my perfect square trinomial. I'm going to take the square root of A and the square root of C, the sine of B, x minus 4, and I can double check that negative 4 times, so this is C times A times 2, in fact is negative 8x, so we're good, is equal to 24. So I've finished completing the square, so now I'm going to go ahead and solve. I forgot my squared here, sorry about that. Take the square root on both sides. So I have x minus 4. Now be careful because some of you on last week's lesson were not simplifying all the way. 8 times 3, so this is 2 times 2 times 2. So is equal to plus or minus 2 on the square root of 6. And we still need to get x by itself, so I'm going to say plus 4. Plus 4, so I get x equals 4 plus or minus 2 on the square root of 6, and we cannot simplify that any further. So what does this mean? This means that if I take 4 plus 2 on the square root of 6 and 4 minus 2 on the square root of 6, so 4 plus 2 on the square root of 6, 4 minus 2 on the square root of 6, oh, I missed my 6, sorry about that. My computer is acting very odd. There we go. That this equation is going to have a root at 8.89 repeating and negative 0.89 repeating. So if I was to graph my original equation, now my original equation was equal to 11. So we would need to move this 11 over by saying minus 11. And that would be a negative 8. So I could graph x squared minus 8x. X squared minus 8x minus 8. And then I can look for my roots. So menu 6, 1. There's my first root. And there's my second root. So you can see that it matched what we got when we simplified that square root. So remember, those are our roots. So here on letter B, let's try this one. Notice this one is not set up correctly. We want C to be on the right and everything else to be on the left. So I'm going to have to move my 2x over here. X squared minus 2x plus 7 is equal to 8. And then I need to move, now I can move my C. So I'm going to move my 7 over. X squared minus 2x, leave a space, equals 1 plus leave a space. Step 2, take b divided by 2. Negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1, and square it is 1. That goes in my box. So I have x squared minus 2x plus 1 equals 2. Step 3, we collected the like terms already. Step 4, factor. Square root of a, square root of c, sine of b. quantity squared equals 2. Double check. 2 times A times C. Yes, that's a negative 2x. And now we can use our square root method. Take the square root of both sides. X minus 1 equals plus or minus the square root of 2. Undo the add subtract. X is equal to 1 plus or minus the square root of 2. And that is how you complete the square. Now the second thing we can do with this is we can use this when we're looking for certain things on a quadratic. This will help us tell us a min or a max. It tells us how many zeros we have. We can also take and create an HK format. So you can see here, they have completed this square. Now they moved, I'm going to solve this one over here. I'm going to write it so that the y is on the right hand side so that it doesn't look so confusing. So we're going to move C, x squared minus 6x plus blank equals y minus 13 plus blank. We're going to leave the y here because we want to change it to vertex form. So negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3 squared is positive 9. You can see they got that here. So now I have x squared minus 6x plus 9 equals y minus 4. I'm going to take the square root of a and c and keep the sign of b, y minus 4. And then I'm just going to move, now I'm not going to do square root method. I'm going to move my 4 over. And when I do that, I get x minus 3 quantity squared plus 4y. And this is, in fact, my vertex form. So I have now taken and put this in HK. So my HK, insiders lie, is 3, 4. My A is positive, so this is going to open up. So this is, in fact, a minimum vertex. Since if you look right here at number 4, determine the number of x-intercepts. Since the minimum value of the function is y equals 4 and it opens up, we know that it's not going to touch. We could even sketch it if we wanted. So you can, in fact, create an HK format of this. So if you want to pause me, actually, I'll do letter A with you, and then if you want to try B and C. So on A, I'm going to go ahead and move my 9 over. I'm going to leave it with it on the left-hand side. It doesn't actually matter. And then, so we have y minus 9 plus something, x squared minus 4x plus something. So negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2, and we're going to square that to get 4. So y minus 5 equals x squared minus 4x plus 4 square root. Y minus 5 equals x minus 2 quantity squared plus 5 on both sides. Y equals x minus 2 quantity squared plus 5. So my HK is 2, 5. It opens up, so this is a minimum, so there will be no x-intercepts. It will be above the x-axis. So I'm going to pause, and then you can come back and look at your answers for B and C. Letter B is a little tricky because we have a negative 1, so you can see I factored out the negative 1 up here, and when I came over here and solved it, you can see that I put the negative back in after I solved it and distributed, which changed my signs of everything. So my HK was in fact positive 3, positive 1 opening down. So it is a max and it has 2 roots. And C, y equals x plus 4 quantity squared minus 1. So negative 4, negative 1 opens up, so it's a minimum and it has 2 roots. Please try the check for understanding.